Hello, this is I.U Africa. I'm Yeneli, and these are your headlines on the continent tonight. Violence between fishing and herder communities leaves at least 25 people dead in Cameroon's far north region. Thousands of residents flee to neighbouring Chad. 17 African countries take part in the US-led International Summit for Democracy. Joe Biden invites world leaders to fight for rights and freedoms and against authoritarianism. And French President Emmanuel Macron says he wants the EU to hit the restart button with Africa. He proposes a new deal with the continent, but no details have yet been unveiled. We start the programme in Cameroon. Our sources tell us that at least 25 people have been killed in the far north region. This due to fighting between fishermen, farmers and herders of different communities. Access to water is reportedly at the heart of the conflict. The UNHCR warns that the lack of rainfall has dried up rivers and ponds in the area. Thousands of residents have fled to neighbouring Chad due to the violence. Our correspondents sent us this.
By boat or by foot, hundreds of survivors flock to this refugee camp near N'Djamena, the Chadian capital. 2 hours after his arrival, Bineya Haroun still hasn't moved a muscle. Exhausted and traumatized, he struggles to recall his ordeal. It was the latest attack in a bloody conflict opposing two neighboring communities in northern Cameroon, the Choa, a nomadic tribe of herders, and the Musgum, a tribe of fishermen and farmers. A conflict with ethnic roots, but that's recently been exacerbated by territorial disputes, with the two sides regularly butting heads over access to water. The latest clashes, which began Sunday and continued throughout the week, have become increasingly violent, sparking fears of a full-blown refugee crisis.
D'après les témoignages qu'on a eus de ces personnes qui ont fui ce conflit, ils disent qu'il y avait eu aussi des attaques ciblées dans des domiciles de personnes. Et donc, ce qui a fait que cette vague est un peu différente de la première.
In August, similar clashes erupted between fishing and herding communities in northern Cameroon, killing at least 12 people and forcing hundreds to flee to neighboring Chad. According to Chadian President Idriss Déby, around 30,000 Cameroonian refugees are currently scattered in camps across the country.
Next, US President Joe Biden has kicked off a virtual event for world leaders called the Summit for Democracy. 17 African heads of states are taking part, invited to make pledges to improve democratic systems in their countries. The event comes around 10 days after the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Washington and Beijing offering two radically different views on development. Let's hear from the Ghanaian president at the summit.
And it is that attachment to democratic values and institutions that we're determined to protect, even during this crisis that we've been going through the pandemic. And for the rights of assembly, the rights of free speech, the rights of association, none of those have been abridged in this period.
What's to change, if anything, for EU policy on Africa? President Emmanuel Macron has shared his vision for Europe. This ahead of France taking over the rotating presidency of the EU Council next January. On Africa, he announced that Europe wants a new economic deal and that an EU-AU summit is to take place in February. Macron also focused on strengthening Europe's external borders in order to crack down on irregular migration.
The relationship between Africa and Europe will be structured in all ways around bringing peace to the Mediterranean region, but also bringing peace and prosperity to Europe and Africa. It's in our common interest. We must do this as Europeans by building a future for African youth to reduce inequality, to fight against trafficking that exploits misery and smugglers who have turned the Mediterranean into a cemetery of shame. And so we will organize in this respect a very close collaboration with President Michel, President von der Leyen, and all the member states, a summit between the African Union and the European Union in February, which will be held in Brussels and which will bring together the leaders of the countries and institutions of the African Union and the European Union. The aim of the summit is to fundamentally refocus the relationship.
In Burkina Faso, armed men have killed at least 13 defense volunteers in the town of E.U in the north of the country, some 200 kilometers from Ouagadougou. The ambush came just a day after President Roch-Marc Christian Gabouré sacked his government. This in response to growing public discontent about insecurity in the country. There's been no claim of responsibility so far. Jihadist insurgents, though, are known to operate in the Sahel region and increasingly more frequently in the north of Burkina Faso. The International Criminal Court has announced that Mohamed Said Abdelkhani will go to trial for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The 51-year-old is the alleged leader of a rebel group in the Central African Republic. The I.C.C. says he faces charges of torture, imprisonment and cruel treatment of ex-President François Bozize's supporters. The acts allegedly took place in Bangui between April and August 2013. Now, the Wagner Group is a private military company, one that has made the headlines for its alleged gruesome killing methods and acts of torture. With Malian authorities reportedly negotiating a contract with them, we take a look at the paramilitary's growing influence on the continent. Fraser Jackson has a story.
Soldiers once trained by the European Union are now said to be falling under the influence of a Russian paramilitary organization. Little by little, the Wagner Group is extending its influence on the African continent, but some believe the private mercenary group has ties to the Kremlin. Officially, the Russian group only sends legal instructors to train the troops in line with the EU's ideology, and they do not engage in combat. But the group has been seen flanking government officials, including the president. They appear in military fatigues, well armed, but without national insignia and their faces covered. On social media, a musical note emoji denotes their identity, a nod to the classical composer Wagner. The group has been connected to the army of the Central African Republic since at least 2018. A promotional film by them has even been shown in the capital's national stadium. Some locals are even sporting their merchandise. Moscow has denied any connection to the private security firm, but experts believe the Kremlin is using the group to gain influence.
Les Russes essayent de reprendre pied en Afrique, dont ils n'étaient plus présents. Ils le font par le biais sécuritaire. Et cette société Wagner permet d'être présent sans que l'État russe soit engagé en tant que tel, puisque officiellement l'État russe n'est pas engagé par cette compagnie privée.
France deployed troops to the Central African Republic in 2013 to intervene in the country's civil war. Paris then gradually withdrew troops, and the UN and EU entered the void, with Brussels starting to train the country's national army. But as the influence of the Wagner Group grew, the training stopped.
On va se concentrer sur le conseil stratégique du ministère de la Défense et de l'État-major, plutôt que des formations militaires.
Wagner mercenaries have also been accused of committing atrocities such as rape, looting, and summary killings. The group is said to be deployed in several African countries, including in Mali.
And finally, we take you to Mauritania to meet the Imrigan people. Imrigan means fishermen in Berber, and today those who still work on the shores continue to use traditional methods of fishing. But intensive fish farming in the region is destroying their way of life. Mauritania's last sailing fisherman is a report by Nicolas Bertrand and Jean Barrère, narrated by Wassim Kone.
This strip of sand is one of the most uninhabitable places on Earth. Far from the nearest civilization, it stretches more than 150 kilometers, dividing the Atlantic Ocean and the Sahara Desert. This is where the Imrigan people call home, fisherfolk that settled here hundreds of years ago. Every morning, these men prepare to sail out to sea, readying their traditional flat-bottomed boats. This 68-year-old captain has been fishing here for his entire life.
We mostly fish mullets. Noise pollution is forbidden at sea, so all the motors are prohibited as it's a protected zone. Plus, the petrol from the motors would be bad for the environment.
The Imrigen are the only people authorized to fish here in the Banc d'Arguin National Park, a UNESCO heritage site that serves as an important breeding ground for fish. In shallow waters, the fishermen pull up the net they had cast the night before. During the migration period, any catch is nothing short of a miracle.
There's a variety of fish in these waters: mullet, catfish, barracuda, solefish, and many others. But today, all these fish are hard to come by. It's the will of God.
Fish has been increasingly scarce in the past 15 years, mostly due to industrial overfishing in the region, threatening not only the ecosystem, but also the livelihood of the locals. After the catch, the boat sails toward the village of E.U. The hundreds of inhabitants who live here have made homes out of flimsy wooden cabins. The children make do with whatever they can find to pass the time. The fish are unloaded from the boat, then salted in order to preserve them from temperatures that soar above 30 degrees Celsius. Yali is in charge of the operation. At the end of the day, he heads home, a harsh routine in an austere life.
We use reclaimed wood to make houses and oil them with petrol from the boat motor so that termites don't eat away at them. People don't have the means to build better quality houses. They have no choice but to stay here. Living elsewhere isn't possible.
A way of life that is in steady decline. Only around half a dozen villages remain on the coast of Mauritania, some 600 Imrigens in total. The survival of their traditions now depends on the preservation of this unique natural habitat.
That's it for I.U Africa. Tonight's show was produced by Charlotte Prudhomme and her team behind the cameras.